In the first video, I mentioned how the characters and themes of Big O were more important than the actual plot itself, and I stand by this. One of the reasons I do is because how prominent the characters stick out among the setting itself. In fact, the setting and execution of Big O are enough to set it apart alone. This show made quite a name for itself as a pioneering noir anime in that while dystopian, was so in a very unique way. While most dystopian settings are set in the future, like say Akira or Ghost in the Shell, Big O is set in a setting which oozes the past. While the former works can create discomfort and unease through the knowledge that this could happen, at least there is sort of a possibility that one can reflect on the good old days. The viewer is not as uncomfortable as he could be because they know that this is a potential future and not the future. While the technology of Big O is more advanced than what we currently possess in the real world, at least the giant robots are, its settings and styles and mannerisms are all undeniably set in the past. This in turn strips the viewer of the comfort of the past, as it feels like they are watching a past event, something that has already happened, yet they're unsure of what this event is. It makes it seem like it cannot be altered. While Ghost in the Shell and other dystopian series create uncertainty for the viewer and characters because the cast does not know what the future holds, and they're uneasy over this, the Big O is unique in that the cast is more focused on and bothered by the lack of a past. After all, waking up and not knowing who you are is just as frightening as waking up not knowing if you will be the same person tomorrow. In both cases, temporal issues force the characters into a constant questioning of who they are. In a way, Big O's unique setting makes it even tenser than an anime clearly set in the future. Since everything feels like a past event, it feels like it is already determined whether or not the day will be saved. It feeds into the uncertainty of the amnesia trope. This in turn creates a sort of ticking clock element with no definite cutoff. But it makes the viewer feel like there is a pressure to learn everything, even if they don't really know why. In a sense, Big O is kind of just transcends time. And setting the series in a city of amnesia, in combination with older film tropes and newer technology, plus the fact it's animated, give the show a timeless feel. In line with this timeless feeling is a noir feeling. Now, Big O takes this noir trope of amnesia to the extreme by setting it in a city of amnesia, that being Paradigm City. The city is called this because individual and collective memory only goes back about 40 years. Anything before 40 years is lost to a sort of memory fog. All that is known is that this fog and lack of memory is caused by some great cataclysm. That's about it. The lack of a past is a common point in the show, and its moral implications will be explored more later. Paradigm City itself as a city bears more than a passing resemblance to New York City. In fact, just look at these two shots. It is set up as the last bastion of humanity in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Like actual New York, the city is very uneven. Parts of it are beautiful haunts of the rich and famous, wealthy estates where inhabitants live in the lap of luxury. These areas are under domes, and as such are referred to well as the domes. Other areas are hard-scrabble slums, inhabited by the desperate eking out an existence. Beyond these areas, at the heart of the city, there are a few outlying farm areas and a few smaller suburbs, I guess you would say, at the fringes of the city, and past those are an endless sea of sand and desolation, eventually terminating in an ocean. At the head of everything, however, is the Paradigm Corporation, which is run by a ruthless Alex Rosewater, who by extension controls the city, and even its police. I cannot emphasize how stylish the setting is, and it is obvious that a noir look was set upon from the start. The streets are all worn, and even the nicer parts look like something from the 1930s. There are speakeasies and steamy alleys, run-down tenements and ritzy nightclubs featuring piano acts, and the color palette is mostly dark. And it meshes very well together and helps sell the stylized look, along with dimmer lighting and some beautiful low-angle shots conveying the oppressive feel of the city. Sleek shots like this, well, they just engross you. All of this, of course, is backed by an OST which oozes character, an OST being an original soundtrack. It is part orchestral, part funk, part jazz, and there's a lot of epic anime brass for those great mech fights. And it's also used very fittingly. When the mystery of amnesia is played up, you might hear the bells of the song Weep For. When Dorothy is having a sassy retort with Roger, you might hear a warm and cozy piece, like nature. And of course, the mech fights, as mentioned earlier, always have some sort of inspiring brass, like Short Promise. These brass pieces especially gets me, although I love the entirety of the original soundtrack for the series. All of the imagery and music gets us into the world of Big O, and it helps us ingrain ourselves in and get closer to the characters and world. Especially helpful to us in the process of getting to know the characters are how well certain settings are made to suit certain characters. Look at this shot, for example. Now this is Schwarzwald's room, his apartment. Look how well it describes him. It sells you on him. Immediately, you can tell that this is a residence of a man on a mission, and probably some sort of lung disease. Now, the cluster and all the clutter shows that he's obsessed over something, and he's in a quest. He is set on a certain task. But the fact that it's neatly organized also shows that this is a man of method, and not just some random impulse. He is obsessive and consumed by desire. But he's also intelligent, and has a process of sorts. I also love how the typewriter is named Another Light, showing how Schwarzwald wants to enlighten the masses with his works and sees the dissemination of knowledge as critical. Here is another example of setting up a character. This is Alex Rosewater, the head of Paradigm, and an antagonistic force throughout the series. Now this is the main haunt of Big Al, the Paradigm Dome, and executive offices. Note the monumental architecture and imposing scope and scale. Note the religious imagery. In fact, a good part of the tower actually seems to sort of resemble the biblical Tower of Babel, and there are many other paintings which hint to some kind of religious meaning. In fact, the fact that the building seems to direct everyone's attention upwards to Rosewater's office shows that he is on top. This, without literally saying anything, lets you know that there is a powerful man here, and he wants you to know. He wants you to know that he is mean and he is dominant. He is the guy. He is the guy in charge, and he wants you to know that his word is law. Even a lot of minor characters have setting to set them up. This is Big Ear, and he knows things. As such, he is Roger's informant, and likes to keep a low profile. And his setting, this bar table, speak perfectly to that. Notice how it is out of the way and against the wall. Note how inconspicuous it is. It speaks of a man trying to stay in the background, and simply keep his ears open to the happenings around him. Finally, let's look at a cool inverse of this. This is Angel. Now you're probably thinking, Angel doesn't really have a unique setting. And I think that's exactly the point. In fact, she is the only major character without one. And while Schwarzwald's apartment, Rosewater's dome, Big Ear's bar table, and so many other locations set up their characters so well, often as soon as they are introduced, none does so for Angel. And I think this is intentional. When we see Schwarzwald's apartment, we know this guy's a little off. When we see Big Ear's bar table, we know this guy likes to lay low. And when we see the Paradigm Dome, we know that this guy is dominant. But Angel doesn't really have a setting which does this for her, and this in turn creates a mystery to her. She does not really seem to have a space of her own, and this in turn makes the viewer question more about her and who she really is. Denying her a setting denies her of context. This in turn makes her more intriguing. It also speaks to the fluid and unsure nature of the character, as nothing is, quite literally, set in stone. The setting even helps set up the final twist of the show, and in fact is one of the strongest forces to do so. Note the model city in episode 4. Note the weird and out-of-place stylings of the underground, below the subway of course. Note the blatant giveaways in the final episodes before the last 2. Even the name of the city speaks of this twist, as Paradigm City literally means model or theoretical city. And this model city is where the model for a great mech anime is set. And this mech anime is one greatly assisted by its strong setting, a setting which is one of its strongest points and works overtime to ingratiate and inform the viewer about the amazing series they have just started.